The Love Life and Lose Weight podcast will teach you the art and science of changing your habits around food. I'm your host, advanced certified weight and life coach, Heather Beardsley. I've helped hundreds of women just like you figure out how to stop dieting, lose weight, and love life on the journey to goal weight and beyond. Hey, welcome to episode 47. This episode is on thought leadership. And this episode was inspired by some questions I saw coming in about being really puzzled and sometimes afraid of some of the thoughts that we sometimes think. And this isn't really talked about very much, but it's very much a human condition to, for example, when you are in a car and you're maybe have a near miss in traffic or something, if it startles you or you're sort of anxious about being on the highway, say, or driving in a new area, your mind might wander off and your mind might start to give you a what if scenario, like if you careened off the road, or what would happen if somebody slammed their brakes on in front of you, something really like scary. I remember having this happen to me when I was a little kid. I remember thinking about my parents dying. That's when that was kind of sparked by when I think it was our dog died. And it was one of my first, memories. And I remember kind of putting two and two together and thinking, well, yeah, if our dog can die, what about mom? What about dad? Like, what about my family? And it made me very nervous. And, the brain is always there sort of working on our perception of what's happening in our life in real time. And these sort of chaotic thoughts or fearful thoughts that seem spontaneous, unless you can have context about what these are really about or like why they make sense to think, can be kind of very disturbing if you let them. Now, of course, I'm a life coach. I'm a weight loss coach. I'm not a brain scientist, and I haven't done a bunch of scientific research or anything like that. This is just my human experience about my own perception of my thoughts. And I spend a lot of time, thousands and thousands of hours, speaking with my clients about their thoughts and how, the space in your brain, let's call it the blackboard of your brain, where your conscious awareness of your thinking plays out. There's actually several, personalities in there, if you will. Forgive the the use of personalities, but I don't know how else to say it. There's when we're young, we just think about our world. We think we are our thoughts. We think whatever we think is true. And that's why little kids, when they're very young, let's say they're walking and mom leaves the room, they kind of freak out because what they see and what they think is the truth for them. So mom is there as long as they can see mom. And if mom walks into the other room, they can't kind of project like, oh, where did she go? They just immediately go to that fearful thought, like she's gone, which, is true, gone from sight, but the thinking behind it isn't very sophisticated at all. And this is evidence of what I call primal thinking. So this is automatic thoughts that come up based on what we call the habit brain, which is your most ancient part of your brain that is responsible for basic human survival. So this part of your brain is designed to always be working in the background, and it's always kind of monitoring um, your state of safety and comfort and what you need to survive as a human being, your thirst levels, your hunger, your satiety, um, your sex drive, all of your sort of primal things that we need to happen to create life. This part of your brain is always kind of monitoring. I like to think about this part of your brain like sitting at a primitive um, station, and it kind of can't really see outside. This is my personification. Like I think about it, this isn't a scientific explanation at all, but um, it kind of can't really ascertain what's actually happening outside of you, right? It's in the dark space of your brain, and it sort of monitors your thoughts, the quality of your thoughts, and which create feelings, right? And those feelings can have a cascade of hormonal responses to them, um, all kinds of physiological responses, increased heart rate, things like that, sweating. I mean, you name it. I don't know. I'm just kind of grasping for like general things that I can think of. So that's the habit brain. It's like planted in there, always working, but mostly quiet. Um, certain things will provoke it that have to do with um, anything new, anything that will change the status quo as well. So when we talk about weight loss, that of course involves changing habits around food and how you eat. And so your habit brain is going to have a lot to say about that. And this is why when you'll start food planning as I recommend, or you start really waiting for hunger if you haven't been, you'll start to hear some automatic thoughts that sort of question you changing up your habits around food. This is why the topic is so relevant today, because the habit brain is going to insert a bunch of thinking when you change your lifestyle around food, when you change your weight, which means losing fat, which the habit part of your brain is going to see as sort of a risky behavior, because the fat on your body is insurance against famine, right? And so the habit brain wants to make really sure that you are safe and okay before it will allow your body to kind of lose weight. Um, so that's habit brain automatic thinking. So like for example, let's say you're waiting for hunger and you haven't been used to waiting for hunger before you eat. You might notice some thoughts of like, I'm afraid to get hungry, or like just maybe you just notice feeling afraid to wait very much longer to eat, even though you're not really detecting that you have much hunger. This is like your sense of like the urge to not wait until you're hungry, just so that you can have certainty and just fill your belly before you feel physically hungry. So this is sort of this can feel like an intrusion to a lot of my clients who are trying to lose weight, because it just seems like, hey, I'm trying to lose weight. Okay, I know I need to wait for hunger. I know it's no big deal. I'm not pushing past, typical hunger. I'm just waiting until I sense definite hunger cues before I eat. So I know I'm not used to doing that, but like this is what I decided. So why am I getting flack by these thoughts that are kind of slowing me down and questioning, and they're making it hard for me to do these things that I want to do? And it can be very confusing. Like, why is this so hard? And usually, the number one uh, reaction with most of my clients is to wish that the thoughts would go away. Because, what I do teach is awareness of your thinking. And the more that you're sort of aware of your habitual thoughts that get in the way of you losing weight, urges for food when you're not hungry, driving thoughts to keep eating even though you've probably had enough, um, doubt that you can lose all the weight. These are all evidence that your habit brain is like, no, like, let's not lose weight. Like, let's just stay right the way that we are. Because your habit brain doesn't want you to lose weight. And so, it's kind of a strange thing to lose weight and have awareness of like the two parts of you that are playing out like differing agendas in the blackboard of your mind. Because let's say you make your plan every day and you kind of know what you're eating, and then there's these thoughts that are directly in the way. They question the plan, they resist the plan, they want you to like doubt that you can even do it, and what's the point, and let's just keep eating, it tastes so good, right? um, the habit brain will also want you to just keep doing everything that you've been doing up until now because it can't critically think into the future. That's not the habit brain's job. The habit brain's job is really just to keep you alive in the moment that you're operating. So it's very much operating in the moment that you're in. It doesn't have like the ability to look too far into the future at all. Maybe just like the immediate future, like in the next minute or two, or maybe just slightly ahead in the day. But it certainly isn't going to take into account your long-term goal of weight loss. That is the another part of your brain. That's the prefrontal cortex. That's what I like to call your manager brain. And your manager brain is able to do all of those kind of deep level skills of delayed gratification, allowing urges to pass without eating from them, you know, helping yourself work out even though you don't feel like it because you want to be somebody who moves every day. So the prefrontal cortex or your manager brain and your habit brain are kind of playing out like two very different personalities in your mind. And then there's a third party here too, a personality of headspace and your conscious awareness. And this is the what I call the watcher. I like to think about this part of you as the part of you that I often say is like, the Wimbledon tennis match, and you see the judge, the line judge for Wimbledon is like up on this almost like this like lifeguard stand that sits up high. So the judge can have a very good view of like where the ball is going. So in this analogy, your thoughts, whether they come from one side, which is your habit brain, or the player on the other side, which is your manager brain, and then there's the watcher. And not necessarily like in a judge kind of way, but this is the watcher who watches these thoughts playing out and can kind of like differentiate the two. In other words, the watcher isn't the ball is the thoughts, and they come from either side of the two dominant personalities. And then there's the watcher who watches the thinking. Okay. So it's kind of interesting. We can lose sight or never really understand that there are these three personalities. So when a thought happens, let's say you have a scary thought. My client's thought was like, I had a terrible vision while I was driving in the car with somebody else driving, that our car careened off the road and my children like died. And she was very upset about this. She didn't understand what was happening in her mind, and she was just freaked out by it. And, when we went over it, it was because she has a new awareness of these different sort of personalities in her mind. And so she's just noticing some of this thought work that's happening in the blackboard of her mind. And this is the thing about awareness. When you increase your awareness, it can kind of feel a little bit noisy. Whereas before, you just thought a thought, you didn't think too much of it, and you were kind of like at the effect of the seeming truth of that thought. But this is why the awareness is so beneficial, because you can sort of like the Wimbledon judge or line judge, if you will, when you see a thought come through your mind, you can start to assign responsibility for like, where's this thought coming from? Is this a thought from the me who is trying to lose weight, my manager brain, who kind of knows that I need to eat a little bit less, that I'm going to want to be saying no to any food that brings me to fullness? Um, the manager part of me who knows that I want to make a plan every day, even though I don't feel like it. And which are the thoughts that are reflective of the habit brain part of my thinking, which is going to play out fears, concerns, worries, anxieties, all of those things, and is concerned about my immediate well being with food, water, connection to people I love. That's also very important, you know, and my safety and my security. And money can be part of that, your home, your stability, your job, things like that. And so once you really realize and you can start to assign responsibility, you can start to understand the players in your mind, the agendas that they have, and how you can kind of shape the conversation that happens. So instead of like a chaotic tennis match happening where nobody's following rules and tennis balls are just flying all over the place, that feels very chaotic. You can start to see that, like, okay, the habit brain is always going to be serving these kind of balls when I am really following my hunger cues and my satiety cues. And my leadership brain is going to really need to start, you know, hitting balls when I know I need to do the things that I need to do to lose weight. And it frees us from being at the effect of any thought, like my client who was really fearful of her thinking. So when you have like a very fear-based thought, a projected thought about your fears, you can just kind of be like, oh, like, of course I'm afraid of that happening. Like, I'm a human being and I notice in the world that all kinds of accidents happen. And that's just my brain relating it to, what if it happened to somebody like me? What if it happened to my family? Like, what would I do? And your awareness of your habit brain's concerns is really important, because if we just shove those thoughts down, even though they're kind of out there, they feel chaotic, they feel like they're intrusive, they feel like they're crazy sometimes. Um, they are trying to give you, um, they're trying to get your attention to what your habit brain is concerned about. Because if your habit brain gets really, really concerned, this is what happens. Your habit brain can kind of shut down your manager brain. And we know that this happens in any kind of situation with trauma. There's a great book out there called The Body Keeps the Score. I highly recommend that you read it. And I read in that book that um, this happens, especially with trauma survivors, that of course we need the habit brain to take over when very like life threatening or extremely scary or violent things happen to us, because we don't want to overthink with the manager brain or waste too much time if a bear is on the trail and running after us, right? The habit brain needs to be able to shut down all of the overthinking that can happen from the manager brain so that you can go into full survival mode. And, you know, hopefully you haven't needed this in your life very much, but I'm sure many of you have. It's kind of a thing where you just go into complete automatic mode. And I think for most of us, we could probably, I know I could say that it's really probably saved my life many times. And I know that it's allowed me to make sure that others were safe too. I remember being at the YMCA when I was like 7 or 8. I was learning, you know, kind of like not beginner swimming, but I was like a flying fish. Do you guys remember how they used to rate you? as far as your swimming skills. So we were doing laps in my group, and then there was a group of like very, very beginner swimmers. Like I think they were like tadpoles or something like that. And I noticed this little boy had pulled away from the edge of the pool, and I saw him going underneath the water. And I just knew like that part of my habit brain just like perked up. And I just had this instant awareness that he was in trouble. The instructor was distracted by the other students and did not notice. And, I wasn't that old myself, but anyway, I swam over there underneath the water and I pushed him up from below. And he grabbed, he was kind of coughing quietly and stuff, but like the instructor never saw, never noticed, never, nothing. And I remember the look on his eyes, and I just was like, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think so." I don't really remember if he even said anything to me, but I knew he was okay. And I watched him for the rest of the swim period that we were in, and I saw his mom come and like take him, home after we were all done and stuff. And I was like, wow, nobody really knows like what happened. But like I just helped that little kid. Maybe he would have drowned. I don't know. And the funny thing is that's happened to me a couple times in my life where I have noticed that people were drowning and I have helped them twice in my life. That part of my habit brain, I'm so glad it kicks in. Like I tell you this story because I have such a respect for it, for its need in extenuating circumstances and extraordinary circumstances. We need the habit brain to be everything that it is. And the habit brain gets a lot of shit by those of us in weight loss who really are sort of annoyed by its resistance to losing weight. It feels very annoying to feel the resistance to eating less, to hear all those urges for food, to go back to the old way we were eating. And we kind of resist the habit brain, but it does have its place and it does need to be listened to and at least respected. I think that's my opinion about it because it can save your life and it can save someone else's life. I also think, in my opinion, it either works with, if you believe in intuition, maybe it works with your sense of intuition, or I don't know if that comes from your habit brain either. But in the times that I know that I've been fight or flight in my life, it's very much worked with my sense of exactly knowing what needed to be done and what I needed to do. So, I respect it. The first time I saw, like, in a learning sense, how the habit brain could get in the way was after I adopted a 9-month old Belgian Malinois mix from the Humane Society. And I knew that those dogs were very impulsive, very smart dogs. They use them like German Shepherds in police work. They're very athletic, they're very stubborn, and they don't have really much processing time. In other words, they're all kind of like impulse. Like they think it and they're gone immediately. That's why they do such good work for police work. Um they're all instinctual. And anyway, I brought her home and she had been outside in Miami with like 3 other dogs kind of fighting for food. So she was a scrapper and she was very headstrong. And I was trying to, of course, like make her feel at home so she could relax and such. But I wasn't always able to do that with this dog. I, for the first week or so, would walk her going out the front door. And I think it was the second week or so. I didn't want to go out the front door because I was the only person home and I didn't want to leave the front door unlocked. So I locked the front door and I'm trying to get her to go out the back door with me and we would go out the back gate. And this dog, like she knew we were going to walk. She knew that already. She was very excited to walk. But I saw how she just dug in. She was like, no, we walk out the front door. That's how I get to my walk. Like she was just locked in. And I'm trying to coax her, like, come on, we're going to go this way. And she just wouldn't. Like, I would have literally had to drag her across the tile floor to get her to go outside. So I just gave up. I just gave up. The only way I was able to, because I didn't want to drag her, of course, um, get her to realize that you could also go out the back door was when I got another dog. But literally for like a while until I got a second dog, she would never go for a walk out the back door. And this just, I tell you the story to give you an idea of how insistent and loud automatic thinking can be. And when you're trying to lose weight and you've always just like eaten at the thought to eat, say, and so you mindlessly snack, trying to change that habit can feel like trying to get my dog Shanti to go out the back door instead of the front door. It's kind of a grudge match. And, you know, my advice to you is to just stick with it. Um, Try to entice yourself. I'm sure if I had put like a line of treats all the way out the back door to the back gate, I could have got her to go, you know. And maybe that's what you need to do for yourself too. Entice yourself to just try to let the habit brain calm down enough to kind of slightly change its behavior over time with a lot of repetition and a lot of like adding the voice of the manager brain to tell the habit brain it's okay. And here's why. We're going to do something different. We're just not going to be snacking anymore and we're not going to starve to death. Another example of very strong habit brain thinking was when I was first took an airplane ride. It was like, I think it was the late 80s. And my gosh, back then you could still like smoke cigarettes on airplanes. It's kind of crazy. And I was a very like naive flyer. I think it was I think it was my first flight by myself. So I was extremely nervous. And back then, like nobody even used the word anxiety, but I was definitely riddled with anxiety. um, so I remember being like, okay, I can feel that the airplane is starting to descend because I have sensitive ears and my ears, I have to like clear them as we descend. So my ears were in a lot of pain and I thought, okay, just close your eyes. And then I could sense that like when I closed my eyes that I could feel the front of the plane was of course descending. So the nose of the plane was lower. So it kind of felt slightly like I'm like tipped down a hill, right? Like I could tell the front of the plane was lower. And when I closed my eyes, all I had was this sense that like we were careening through the air, which of course we are. But just knowing I was on a very unfamiliar airplane going at a great rate of speed through the sky, and then we're going to land softly on a tarmac somewhere, like my brain just went into total panic mode. And I remember I kept thinking about like, how are we going to slow down the plane? Like the plane has no brakes. Like I understand flaps and slowing your speed down or anything like that. I was just in like full blown panic mode. And I was as disturbed by the thoughts in the moment as my client was this week with thinking about a car crash. Um, and I just thought I was a weirdo. I didn't really realize about habit brain versus manager brain. I just thought, how is nobody else like nervous like I am? Why is nobody else kind of freaking out? Everybody seems to just be so normal. Um, and then I eventually got the idea that like, I guess I just have to ignore thinking that feels really intrusive and kind of chaotic and crazy and fearful. And that's how I learned to deal with my anxiety as a young person. It was completely internal. I never talked about it with anybody. I didn't even have words to discuss it. I just sort of learned to ignore crazy, chaotic thoughts in my head. So I learned more about like the different personalities in your mind of your conscious awareness, the watcher, the habit brain, and the manager brain when I took advanced yoga classes and I took, the philosophy part of yogic philosophy and the watcher and um, yoga was created in great part to be a vehicle. There's 8 limbs of yoga to quiet the mind. And the one branch of yoga that involves postures um, is the physical way of doing that. So you breathe through movement, you hold movement, and you have a point of focus. And when you do those things, your habit brain starts to quiet. And all of that is in service to the very last pose. That's part of all yoga practices, which is Shavasana, which is they call it corpse pose. And you just lay down on the ground. And but the whole reason for the class is to quiet the mind enough that you can close your eyes, be in a position of rest without having what they often call your monkey mind or your habit brain mind or even your manager mind, which is can send a bunch of thoughts too, to have a quiet space to just be the witness, the one who just watches, not the one who actively thinks, the one who observes that we are neither the thoughts of our habit brain and we're neither the thoughts of our manager brain. We are the awareness that is beyond both of them. And so many people, in my 22 years of practice, they can't lay in that pose with their mind. Their minds are so used to just like ping ponging thoughts in a chaotic game of tennis all over the place. It feels terrible. It can feel as terrible as I felt on the plane or my client felt in the car, imagining a terrible scenario. But when you realize that you are the watcher, you can start to interfere, if you will, with a mind that is not in control. It's not in your conscious control. Because if you just are the watcher, right? And you just let your habit brain think whatever the hell it wants, whenever it wants, it will feel chaotic. But with practice, you can have a much more controlled, blackboard space, if you will, in your mind's eye where your thoughts take place. So, there are ways that you can do this. The first thing that I would say is to not resist the thoughts, but just take them in the present moment when they happen. I said the first step would be to determine whether the thought is from your habit brain or your manager brain. Now, of course, let's take weight loss mode, right? Because that's why we're all here. So if you're in weight loss mode and you notice the thought to keep eating because the food tastes so good, you can identify that that's not part of your long-term goal. So that's coming from the habit brain's concern that you're not going to have enough food. And so what you would do is you would question the thought. You would say, no, like it requires a response. Like my client who had, the very vivid playing out of the car crash and of her kids getting hurt. You want to like acknowledge the thought is happening, not resist it, not react to it, but be like, oh, I must have a fear of that happening. And in the case of like, let's just keep eating, it tastes so good. It's like, oh, yeah, I noticed that I'm used to keeping eating. And that's felt like what has to happen for a long time. And so, of course, my brain is concerned about that. But you check in with your stomach, am I good? Am I satisfied? Have I had enough to eat? And if the answer is yes, you can say, yeah, it'll be okay. We can just put our fork down, even though the food tastes good. Of course, the food tastes good. I don't eat food that doesn't taste good. That's not a good enough reason for me to keep eating it. So thank you for your thought, habit brain, but we're not doing that anymore. You see, that's thought leadership. That's where you have to be the leader of these automatic thoughts that mostly the habit brain sends up that can be problematic with weight loss. So you've got to acknowledge the thought. You have to know that it always makes sense why you think a problematic thought. So you want to acknowledge it, sort of trace it back. Like, why would I be concerned about this? Why would I be thinking this? It makes sense. Even if you don't know the exact reason why, you can kind of like work on it in the background, but you don't have to act in accordance to any thought that you have. So this is where I see a lot of my clients getting really like hung up because, for example, let's say you have a weigh in and it's disappointing. And let's say like you had a gain and you actually thought you were going to lose weight that week. And boom, all of a sudden you notice you're thinking, this is never going to work. I'm never going to get this. This is too hard. Boom, boom, boom. 3 automatic thoughts from your habit brain that represent unwillingness to change, resistance to change. And that's all the habit brain's job is. And so you got to say, like, oh, I get it. I know that that part of me does not want to change. I have to be the leader that shows my habit brain that we're going to proceed anyway. And here's why it's safe to do so. So, um, you're going to shape and direct any primal thinking by adding to, correcting, or rejecting the thought outright. Yeah, that's an option too. You can just be like, nope, we just don't think this anymore. I don't think this bullshit anymore. Or if I have like, sometimes I'll have like a really critical thought, like, oh my God, I'm so stupid. Or I'll never get this. My book came out this past week. It's been thrilling. And of course, I've gone through the book and I've found some formatting errors. I found a couple spelling errors, of course, through 2 copywriters and what have you. They just get in there. And I had this thought like, oh my God, that's so embarrassing. And I just said to myself, I will not be embarrassed for being human writing a book. Like, even books that have big publishers attached to them and whole teams of copywriters and copy editors, they have spelling errors. Like, it happens. That's not the point of the book. And you know what? I'm glad that my book has a couple errors in it. I need to update the manuscript and re-upload it. But I'm not going to let the fearful thought of my habit brain direct how I feel about my book. It's just not going to happen. And this is where you have that leadership energy. So you just listen. I expect that, I'm not quite done reading it as a reader, after it's been released. When I continue to read my book, I'm sure I'll find another one. The the habit brain thought will come up again. Oh my God, that's so embarrassing. I can't believe it. Like, I thought I caught all these errors. And I'm just going to say, nope, it doesn't matter to me. Like, it's okay. And if I want to correct it and re-upload it, I will. It's not a big deal. Um, so I hope that you can take a little bit of heart to what I'm saying. If you let your habit brain's automatic thinking mean a lot, if you take it at face value, if you think you have to worry because it's offered you that you can't do something or you're not going to be successful or I don't believe it's going to happen. So many of my clients think that like just because they thought that means that it's true. It's totally not true. What if these thoughts from your primal brain, they're more questions than statements of ultimate reality and truth? Because in the moment when your brain isn't sure about an outcome, which we never are, no one has a crystal ball for what's going to happen. And so neither does your brain. And so when it says this is never going to work, it's like a question. Do we want to believe that this is never going to work? Or in the case of my primal thought about a spelling error in my book, do we want to think that we should be embarrassed about this? And it's just looking for your leadership on this. And so many of us, we just stay mute and we say nothing. And we allow that thought to like roost in the rafters of our mind and just like a pigeon and like shit all over our dreams. Fuck that. You have to respond to automatic thinking that is in the way of what you want. You have to tell your brain how you want it to think. You have to respond to it. It's a two-way conversation, just like in that metaphor of like the Wimbledon game, right? Like your habit brain is sending the ball to your manager brain, and your manager brain needs to send the ball back. And they each have their own strategy for what they want. And you're the watcher who watches it play out. And when you need to intervene, you're going to use your manager brain because that's your access to your agenda for changing your behavior. You're going to use your manager brain and you're going to respond to the habit brain. We don't really take on the voice of the habit brain. The habit brain is like its own thing. It's like the 4-year-old of your mind. It's kind of like running around with a knife sometimes. Your manager brain needs to take the knife out of the 4-year-old's hand sometimes and just be like, no, you're not running the show here. That's like letting the 4-year-old drive the car of your weight loss. You would never do that. But yet so many of us sit there and they're like, well, I just don't believe that this is going to happen. Like as if that thought, I don't know if this is going to work, means anything. Like who in the face of the history of the world, the history of humankind, when they had a thought, this is never going to work, how does the thought know? It doesn't. Like we kind of just blindly believe that like some thought that comes up from the depths of your brain that is negative and, curmudgeonly somehow has all the answers. It doesn't. It feels like it does because it's tapping on a habit of thinking probably that you've had for a while and it just feels true, but that doesn't mean it is. So the truth is you get to think and feel whatever you want. The more that you think and feel in a way that aligns with the result of what you want, the you who has lost all of her weight, and you just choose to think like that, the easier it is to shape your habit brain for it to calm down and for it to know like, oh, it's safe to lose weight. It's safe to lose all of our weight. It's safe to not worry about so much about whether we believe. It's more important for us to just get into action and do the things that, I know I need to do every day. I need to wait for hunger before I eat. I need to not eat to physical fullness. I need to stop when I've noticed that I'm no longer hungry and I've had enough. Yeah, I mean, I might feel unsatisfied emotionally. I might think, oh, that's not enough food. Maybe, and the question is like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But again, there is no crystal ball. If I don't have hunger, and I think I'm somewhere between no longer hungry, but not yet full, it's okay to stop there and just see what happens. And all of this does is it just takes the tension around the primal brain driving the bus of your weight loss. It allows you to become a thought leader in your mind's eye of your thinking and your conscious awareness. And it just allows you to become the creator of future you because you have a way to access that manager brain. That manager brain is there at your beck and call. That's what it's there for. That's the part of human beings that that part of our brain that has allowed us to evolve past all other, animals, and, sort of dominate the earth's landscape as like, the species that has just evolved past everybody else. And look what everything that we've been able to achieve by it. You look at a skyscraper, you look at a building, you look at a car, you look at a computer, like prefrontal cortexes, our manager brains did all that. And they did all of it with a habit brain in someone's mind. The inventor, Steve Jobs, all these people who have created amazing things, and the humble person who just learned how to like lose weight and feel safe. All that played out with a manager brain that just took a leadership position, and shaped the thinking of the primal brain at the same time. So I hope it's been helpful. I want you to really think about thought leadership in your mind's eye and how you're going to start responding to thoughts that don't feel great, thoughts that feel fearful and urgent and doubtful and negative. And just know that it's supposed to be there. It doesn't mean that you can't do what you want to do. You just think on purpose as much as you can. And just know there's always like that little 4-year-old in your mind's eye who wants to have a say, who wants to be listened to, and you can listen to her. But you don't let her drive the bus. Okay. So for your coach homework, I'm just kind of doing this on the fly. Why don't you write about how you want to respond to negative primal thinking? What is going to be your go-to way on the fly that just doesn't take more than a couple of seconds, so that you can start to take more leadership of how you choose to think about, the challenging things in life, especially weight loss can be challenging. How do you want to do that? For me, it's like I notice it. I notice the thinking. Then I identify where it's coming from. Is this from my habit brain or is this from my manager brain? Do I actually believe this or is it a question? And then immediately I respond like, it's okay. We can feel scared and we can do it anyway. Betsy, who I work with, often says, I doubt it and I do it anyway. And I think that's such a great saying. Okay, so write a little bit about that in your journaling and come visit me on the episode reel on Instagram if you have any questions about thought leadership, or you want to have some feedback for me or some insights, and we can keep the conversation going over there. The book is out. The Love Life and Lose Weight book is out on Kindle right now. The paperback will be coming out in a couple of weeks, maybe not two. It's 2 to 4 weeks is the estimate that I was given. So sometime in September of 2023. And so if you're a paperback person, thanks for your patience. It just takes a little while to get the paperback version going, but I'm thrilled to say that the book was #1 new release on the day it was released in 3 different categories. I think one was diets, the other one was menopause, and I can't remember the other one. But it's like a top seller in new releases. And thanks to all of you who went and bought the Kindle and who have taken the time to review the book. I really, really appreciate you so much. I really don't even have words how much that's made a difference. Thank you so much. And we'll talk soon. Stay focused, and so long. Hey, if this episode was helpful, then let's connect. Visit hbeardsley.com/subscribe. That's hbeardsley.com/subscribe. You'll get a gift from me, exclusive subscriber content, and advanced notice of in-person events.